Okay, and so this is part two, and I will continue with Karate's main positions. And this is the table that is part of the chapter that's in your readings. And again, I don't want you to get too bogged down with the different categories that things fall into, because you'll see different readings that put things in different ways. For example, karate has phenomenology as a theoretical perspective, whereas some would say that is a methodology, or it's an approach to doing research. So I think it's really confusing if you stick to these hard and fast dividers between what is an epistemology, what is a theoretical perspective, what is a methodology. But just know that one flows from one to the next. So when Crotty uses theoretical perspective, he's really talking about the philosophical stance behind a methodology, as he says, the assumptions that we make, and how the methodology is going to discover that. And so positivism, interpretivism, these are theoretical stances or perspectives on research. It's not a theoretical, or it's not a theoretical framework, and it's not a methodology or a more practical approach to how you're going to conduct your research. It's really the framework before you get to the methodology. And in that sense, a theoretical framework is said to mean something a little different than theoretical perspective. Our perspective might be a positive approach, which is a positive approach to research is a value-free, detached sort of observation role, and you're looking for these universal truths. And whereas the interpretivist approach is looking for, and I'll quote Karate here, looking for culturally derived and historically situated interpretations of the social life world. So we're taking into account the humanity, we're taking into account history, we're taking into account cultural diversity. That's interpretivism. Those, you can see, those aren't theories, those aren't theoretical frameworks. You know, back to different theoretical frameworks that you can think of. Those are lenses in which to view your particular study, but they're not universal truths. Whereas these ones are kind of the universal truths that you follow, that you believe to be true. So I hope that kind of makes sense. But again, you're going to find a lot of mixed terminology in this. I think that table is helpful, though, in kind of thinking of things more broadly and then narrowing them down into more practical pieces of the research puzzle. There's a few sites that I've given here. There's one, if you just Google ontology, epistemology, blah, 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 in Research Simplified, that has a pretty high rating on YouTube for defining all of these different terms. I mentioned the interactive onion, where you can look at these terms, you can highlight and click on them and get definitions for them. And then there's another YouTube video on methodologies and methods that I found to be quite good. And maybe I should post this so you've got that link. It's pretty hard to find it otherwise. But the author of that, in that video, talks about the difference between methodology and methods. Karate's table illustrates that pretty well as well. But she talks about it being sort of like a mountain, where what you see above ground are the methods or the tools or the active things that you're doing to collect the data. We see the survey, we see the interviews, we do the observation, we listen to people talk, data reduction, all of those things. The methodology are the ideas that underpin the methods that we've chosen. It's what you don't see. It's the underlying philosophy, the underlying thinking that guides those methods. That's what methodology is. So methods are what you see, and the thinking is what you don't see, and that's below the surface of the mountain, and that's the methodology. That video is really helpful at describing that. I think in this one, when the question that I posed is just again, it's pretty broad. I like to leave it fairly broad because then you don't feel like it's not a test, like there's not a right or wrong answer. It really can go in the direction that you wish it to go. And think about if you have a preference. I'd like to take it down to a bit of practicality and talk about if you have a preference to methodologies and how is that methodology influenced, or how does it pair with what you think your epistemological position is? In that sense, I want you to talk a bit theoretically or a bit philosophically, but I want you to take it down to the practical as well. You might want to even challenge yourself by thinking of a problem or a research question that you might be interested in studying someday, or that you've seen studied, and think about the methods and the methodology behind that went into that research, or that could go into that research, and what would kind of the thinking be behind that as to what you expect, what you sort of expect research to represent. Do you believe that there's multiple realities that exist out there, which is a relativist position, or do you believe that there is sort of one truth and that we can find those facts through quantitative studies and through particular things we can find out XYZ about libraries or about users, user behavior, that sort of thing? Or is it shaped by different contexts? Do you have a relativist approach to understanding that concept or that idea, and are both valid? The answer is probably yes, but it's amazing how research can be such a matter of interpretation and a matter of philosophical perspective. I'm just looking to see here if there's anything else that I wanted to mention. I think just to summarize, I want to emphasize again that terms can be very confusing, and it depends who you read, but the basic premise is that there has to be a philosophical foundation to why you're studying what you're studying, and your approach to doing that research has to follow those philosophical assumptions. I want you to look for examples of this in the literature. And I think that's all I'm going to talk about for this video. I'll be looking forward to your posts and for any other readings that you might discover. Just a note about your submissions, which are quite fantastic because I think you're all quite skilled at this online discussion forum. And you've been well trained by the instructors, the professors you've had before me. And I don't think I grade particularly hard or harshly, and I certainly don't think I'm unfair. But I am sort of gauging it, each one against the next, and looking for creative and original thoughts. I'm not looking for you to explain to me again what the reading said. I want you to explain them within the context of the arguments that you're making. So in that way, it's helpful if you tie in your own experiences, your own thoughts, your own interpretations of the readings. And also to look a little further than the readings that have been given. You do want to rely fairly heavily on these readings, but they are not, the be-all, end-all of the readings. And there's a lot more out there, so I want you to explore and get what you can from other readings. And then try to frame your 2 questions so that they really invoke more thought, because your group members have been doing the same reading that you have. And a question like, what are your thoughts on that issue? Or have you ever done this? Or have you ever seen, is maybe just a little bit, doesn't continue the conversation. It doesn't push people to think further. It's good if they share, but it doesn't push them to think further. Like, you want to ask questions about how can we challenge this, or what different method here, I found this study and this methodology is this, what other methodologies would be suitable in this case, and why? And you really want to challenge your readers in your discussion group to have to think and to have to contribute more greatly than just their sort of initial ideas about something, or their impulsive, sort of what their impulsive answer would be. You want them to put a little bit more time and thought into that. So best of luck and enjoy the readings. This is really heavy stuff, and it tends to be done over months in a 600 level course. So we're really touching the surface, and I just want to get your thoughts and try to tie it back into library and information science research if you can. So thanks for listening, and have a good week, you guys.